guess I could do another video, you heard me, about a little bit about me, you heard me, because people don't really understand, you heard me. So, I'ma basically tell you, my life path, you hear me, and, probably some shit I've been through, you hear me, or shit I seen or whatever, you hear me, but, fuck, I'ma do the best I could. Alright, when I was growing up, you heard me, so when I was growing up and shit, I used to be out, you hear me, with my partner, you know, and shit like that, because when I was a kid and shit, so I used to be out climbing trees and shit, man, that shit used to be fun, you hear me, like, I grew up, you hear me, New Orleans, you hear me, I miss you, but, yeah, man, that shit used to be fun, you hear me, growing up and shit, you hear me, but, let's say, I probably was bullied once, well, I'd say like, I'd say 2-3 times at the most, you hear me, when I was in like elementary and shit, you hear me, that's another time I can explain that shit again, that shit, but, yeah, you hear me, then, fuck, I used to grow up, you hear me, like, I used to be a funny ass little nigga, you hear me, quiet and joking, but I was still mostly quiet majority of the time of my life, you hear me, I was a quiet person, so, that's why doing videos is just wild to me, you hear me, so, yeah, man, then growing up, you hear me, I said, I just skip past to when Katrina hit. You hear me? When Katrina hit, I was going to 7th grade. You hear me? So my 7th grade year, I stayed in Pewaukee, Wisconsin. You hear me? My whole 7th grade year, and then came back down to New Orleans, back home. You hear me? And in fact, I remember this. So when I was a kid, you hear me, my grandpa was a pastor, you hear me, preacher, one of them, you hear me, but he was paralyzed from the neck down, you hear me, because he was shot in the head. So he used to preach from his bed, you hear me. So yeah, I grew up Christian, you get what I'm saying? And I had to make sure I mentioned that, you hear me, for sure. So you can still kind of get a little grasp on what I'm saying, you hear me? So I grew up Christian, you hear me? I grew up knowing the Bible and shit like that, you hear me? Sometimes I be thinking about it, you hear me? Like, I used to remember the names and shit, you know what I'm saying? So around like 6th grade, you hear me? We started going to church that was right next to the school that I was going to, you hear me? But I was left. So we used to get picked up and shit like that too, you hear me? So, let's see. So yeah, back to Katrina. So after Katrina hit, you hear me, we was staying in Pewaukee, Wisconsin, you hear me, at that point, you hear me, I went to school with a lot of white people, you know what I'm saying? But when I was in elementary, it was mostly black and Vietnamese, you hear me, probably a couple Spanish people, you hear me, they ain't really had it. You hear me? Fuck, you hear me, like I said, different teachers and shit. But, yeah, 7th grade, you hear me, I was out there in school, you hear me, that was I first got my head twisted too. So, then I'm back down here, you hear me, 8th grade year, you hear me, moved back to the same house, you hear me, after Katrina. And, so, let's see, so my 9th grade year, I think was when I think my 9th grade, either, it might be my 10th, I'm not sure, you hear me, all I know is I was 16 when I first started smoking weed, you hear me, I started smoking cigarettes when I was 15, you hear me, but, I started smoking weed and shit, you heard me? That's around the time nigga used to freestyle a lot, man. That shit used to be funny, you heard me? Like my nigga Val, you heard me? Man, that nigga was a fucking beatbox master, you heard me? Boy, was exclusive, you heard me? My nigga, you heard me? Sure. Yeah, man, you heard me? Nigga used to be smoking a lot, you heard me? That's around the time nigga ain't know nothing about, you know, spirituality, you heard me? Nigga ain't know really that shit about shit, you heard me? Nigga was basically living in a box, you heard me? Just like anybody else, you heard me? So, after that, you know, yeah, like I was saying, niggas started smoking and shit, and shit got even more funnier, you heard me? Oh man, classics. You hear me? But yeah, man. Oh, Sam. So, yeah, you hear me? After that, you hear me? And, you know, just fucking living and shit. I really don't remember the year. I ended up going to Atlanta, you hear me? Because after Atlanta, my nigga put me on some shit called Vigilant Citizen, you hear me? And even then, you hear me, like around that time, you hear me, around my 8th grade and shit, whatever like that. After, you hear me, even then, you hear me, I used to always believe that the stars was here before a book was created. You get what I'm saying? I used to always think that shit anyway. You get what I'm saying? So, double back, you hear me? So, yeah, man. Yeah, he put me on Vigilant Citizen, you hear me? So, bam, once he put me on Vigilant Citizen, you hear me? It was a closed case. You know what I'm saying? You hear me? Like, bam, I was just looking up shit, reading all this shit, looking at all the shit that they had going on or whatever. You hear me? I'm like, damn, man, this shit crazy. You hear me? And so after that, you hear me? After that point, as I look at TV, you hear me? And you know, listen to music, and I'm looking at all this shit, and I'm like, damn, man, what the fuck? You hear me? Like, this shit crazy. You hear me? So at that point, you hear me? I'm awakening now. You hear me? I'm starting to see the shit that's going on. So you hear me? That was, you know, this was years ago. You hear me? So yeah, man. Once I start saying that shit, you hear me? I just started looking at everything. Like, I just started observing everything else. You hear me? And man, the shit was just wild. You hear me? So let's see. Bam. Let's see. I was woke then, you hear me, by the time I had my first job. So 2011, you hear me, I graduated school. I graduated high school, you hear me, then I went to college. I went to college for like 2.5 years, you hear me, for psychology. You hear me? So after that, I started working. You hear me? And once I started working, you hear me, I ain't even want to go back to school, you hear me? Because at that point, I already knew what was going on. So I started finding out about, you know, straw man and shit, you hear me? So, damn, I'm looking at this shit, you hear me, as I'm working, probably like 2013, 14, some shit like that, you hear me? So I'm working at McDonald's, you hear what I'm saying? You hear me? And bam. Around that time, you hear me, you know, still doing research, looking shit up, woo, 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 you hear me, I'm still in the rabbit hole, you hear me, so, let's see, after that, yeah, I was watching shit like, you know, how the world go in and shit like that, so I'm looking at all these compilations about earthquakes and tsunamis, all types of shit that's going on around the world, you get what I'm saying? So I'm like, hey, you hear me, man, this shit crazy, you hear me? So, bam, you know, I'm still doing research, you hear me? Like, after my nigga put me on, you hear me, I ain't stopped. You hear me? I kept doing research, you hear me? I kept looking for shit, you hear me? Woo, 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 you hear me? I can't stop. You hear me? So, whatever, you hear me? So, let's see. So, me working at McDonald's, me looking at all this shit. So bam, I end up moving back. You hear me? I end up moving back around my mama's house. You hear me? After some shit done happened. But So bam, I move over by my mama. You hear me? This one I have. Alright, this time you hear me, I seen first UFO, you hear me, and miss you hear me? And that's when I had a whole kind of ghost encounter, you hear me? That's a whole nother story, I explain that shit, you hear me? So bam. Bam. All this shit going on, you hear me? And then around that same time when I moved over by my mama, I started saying like synchronicity and shit, you hear me? Like deja vu, whole lot of deja vu, you hear me? Because after I started working at McDonald's, like after I moved back by my mama, I was working at McDonald's on Canal, you hear me? And then I ended up working at Walmart, you get what I'm saying? So yeah, I hear me? At that time I moved back by my mama, I had a whole deja vu moment listening to a song that I never heard before, but I heard it before. You hear me? Like the shit was crazy. You hear me? I don't know how the fuck I heard it, but I never heard the song before. You hear me? So that was a whole deja vu moment of hearing. You get what I'm saying? So after that, man, me working at Walmart, you hear me? Now at this point, you hear me? I'm waking people up as long I'm on my journey, you hear me? And at that time, I'm going with you know, I'm falling back from religion and shit like that. You get what I'm saying? Even then, I was falling back from religion before, but you know, this me trying to observe it, you hear me? Trying to figure out what it is, and you get what I'm saying? So at that point, you hear me? You know, I'm talking to people, oh yeah, this I found out, woo, 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 you hear me? And, so, bam, let's see, after that, you hear me, yeah, at that point, you hear me, I was saying buku synchronicities, you hear me? At that time, you hear me, I wasn't into spirituality, you hear me, and I didn't even know what a synchronicity was, but I understood what it was. You get what I'm saying? You hear me? So, damn, I'm saying all these synchronicities, you hear me, about shit that I'm going through, like problems, like if I have problems or some shit, you hear me, like, or whatever like that, you hear me, bam, you hear me, something just happened, you hear me, and I understand the answer to the problem that I had. You get what I'm saying? So I understood the synchronicities, you hear me, even though I didn't know at that time what synchronicities was. So yeah, man, at that time, you hear me, bam, that shit happened, you hear me, then I end up moving again, you hear me, and I came across fucking Dolo the Polyman, you hear me? So for me watching Dolo, you hear me? Well, before I started watching Dolo, I was watching fucking Nature Boy, you hear me? And you know, still doing research throughout everything, you hear me? Like I really do research, you hear me? Like if there's a word inside a sentence that I don't know, I go look up that definition. If there's a word inside that definition that I don't know, I go look up a whole nother definition. You get what I'm saying? I'm piecing all this shit together. Oh, alright, boom. You get what I'm saying? So, yeah, at this point, you hear me, I'm watching Dolo the Polyman. You hear me? You know, he talk about spirituality and, you know, astrology and all that other shit, you hear him. But dude was different for sure, you hear me? I definitely got a lot of information from that boy, you hear me? So at around that time, you know, I'm not watching Nature Boy no more, you hear me? And bam, so Dolo basically introduced me to like fucking astrology and shit like that, you hear me? So I already knew about my sign and shit, you hear me? I ain't really, you know, dig into that shit, but you know, but watching this nigga, you hear me, breaking all that shit down, you hear me, like, and I'm understanding this nigga, you hear me, like, man, this shit was crazy. And like, and the crazy thing is, you hear me, and hopefully y'all do understand, when you come across information, you just can't believe the shit. You have to go do your research, you hear me? And then you gonna get the answer, you hear me, at the end of the day, you hear me? So I'm watching this nigga, you hear me, bam, this nigga be like, alright, this where the sun is, this where the moon is, you hear me? Since you this sign, you hear me, this gonna happen, woo 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 woo, you hear me? So woo woo, so bam, and I'm listening and shit, you hear me? I actually go out, you hear me? and I'm like, I literally, you hear me, like the energy that this nigga was saying, you hear me, the shit really happened. You hear me? I'm like, damn, man, you hear me? Because, like, what happened that day, you hear me? I came home and I watched it, and I'm like, son, that shit was crazy. How the fuck? You hear me? So, yeah, he put me on, you know, astrology, you hear me? And he basically induced a nigga to, like, spirituality on some shit, I guess I would say. You hear me? And then, so, bam, I'm watching this nigga for a while, you hear me? And then I started watching, Ose Kufa, you hear me? And, well, I was watching them, but I started watching them more. So I kind of fell off of Dolo, you hear me? So I'm watching this shit, and then at this point, you hear me? I'm just, you know, fucking looking around, you hear me? Doing my research, you know, still doing buku shit, you hear me? And so bam, you know, as I'm watching, at this point, now I'm starting to watch. I started watching tarot cards and shit. So me just listening to the shit, you hear me? I end up finding out, you hear me, that I'm really fucking clairvoyant, you hear me? I'm clairaudience, you hear me? Fucking intuitive impact, you hear me? I mean, niggas don't have to believe it, but hey, fuck it is what it is. But, so yeah, fuck I said. So yeah, as I watch the tarot, you hear me, and I'm listening to this shit and I understand. Now as I'm watching the tarot, it's breaking down, you hear me, at least to my own personal understanding on how to move. You hear me? Now, bam, now I understand how to move spiritually. You get what I'm saying? So now I'm watching Google shit, you hear me? At the end of the day, you hear me, the more information that you come across, you hear me, the more your perception is going to change. You hear me? The higher you go, you hear me, the more your perception is going to change. You hear me? Ain't no way cause I ain't even gonna lie to you, bro. When I go to trying to think about, like, at least the vision, you hear me, of me being younger before I end up getting into spirituality, you hear me, before my perception change and all this other shit, I can't even see that shit no more. I can't put myself back in that. I can't. You hear me? I don't feel it at all. You hear me? But at the end of the day, you hear me? So now, yeah, I tell people all the time, man, I've been an observer. I've been an observer my whole life, you hear me? Because I always been in myself. You hear me? Yeah, I had partners and shit. Yeah, I had friends, you hear me? But at the same time, you hear me? I was being by myself, you hear me? I never portrayed to be myself like nobody, you hear me? I never acted like nobody, you hear me? I never wanted to be nobody else, you hear me? I always been myself my whole life, you hear me? I don't have to portray myself no way, you hear me? I don't have to carry my way. I don't have to carry myself a certain way to act like anybody, you hear me? Because I'm being myself, you hear me? At the end of the day, you get what I'm saying? So the thing is, niggas just don't understand my perception. You hear me? I really see shit a different way, you hear me? And if you look at the Leo's trait, you hear me, they very creative. So at the end of the day, you hear me, I create my own way to move how I want to move, you hear me? And it seems perfect to me, you hear me? Because at the end of the day, you hear me, I am just a fucking reflection of who you is. You hear me? The things you don't like about other people is things that you don't like about yourself. You hear me? The problems that you see with other people is problems that you see with yourself. You hear me? It may not be in that same part. You get what I'm saying? But it's a whole nother area of your life that same problem is. You hear me? And this is fucking facts. You hear me? Truth. You hear me? I'm a fucking truth seeker. You hear me? I don't go off of what most of people say. You get what I'm saying? I don't follow trends. You hear me, nigga? I'm a trendsetter. You heard me? Trailblazer. Man, stop fucking playing. You heard me? This is me. You heard me? I don't have to be nobody. You heard me? But myself. You heard me? Because at the end of the day, everybody is their own person. You heard me? If you following trends, you heard me, nigga? What nigga you a follower? You heard me? You want to cut that? If they had a fucking celebrity just say, wild fucking example. If it was a fucking celebrity who fucking cut all their hair off, you hear me, and you wanted to be like them, and everybody started cutting their fucking hair just to look like this motherfucker. No, I'm not a fucking follower, you hear me? I'ma always be myself, you hear me? That's one thing about me, you hear me? I'ma always be myself, you hear me? And I completely understand what's going on, you hear me, as I look around, you hear me? People just don't see my perception, you hear me, or may not understand what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying? That's why I'ma try to I'ma try to do my best at using examples or analogies or whatever, you heard me, so I can clear up what I'm saying. You heard me? Or for you to even envision what I'm saying. You heard me? Because if I talk about some shit that's way out of this world, you're not gonna get the fuck I'm saying. You heard me? Because I can't even break it down my fucking self for me to explain it to you. You heard me? And this is facts. You don't understand. I'm started from the same spot majority of people started, inside the fucking box. I started inside the fucking box. My partner showed me something. Oh, I picked my head up, nigga. I looked out that bitch. Oh shit. Now I hopped out that bitch, and now I see the box of what the fuck it is. You hear me? And I see majority of people in that motherfucker still walking around in fucking circles. You hear me? Look. This what people do. This what people do. Look. This is what people doing. This shit funny to me. You hear me? Look, that's really what people doing. Oh, damn, boy, that football game was fire. Damn, man. Boy, I like them shoes. Everybody need a gift pad of them bitches. I cracked my fucking self up, bruh. You hear me? Because people was funny, son. You hear me? At the end of the day, son, I love to make myself. You hear me? Because I love laughing. Laughing make me happy. You get what I'm saying? Laughing really make me happy, bro. You hear me? And laughter, you hear me, is what helps us also build relationships too. You hear me? Like, say if you have a problem with somebody, you hear me, or whatever like that. You get what I'm saying? They may not like you or whatever like that. You get what I'm saying? Oh, and they have a conversation with somebody, you hear me, but like you don't want to be no asshole, so you won't be cool with them. You get what I'm saying? So. Oh yeah, you laugh, you hear me, and you make eye contact with me. You get what I'm saying? Like it ain't no problem, you hear me? Like nigga just lay it back. You get what I'm saying? So you want a person to be comfortable. You get what I'm saying? Now one thing about me, you hear me? I never been a selfish ass person. You hear me? I always been giving. You hear me? And I don't know why I didn't like taking shit. You hear me? So I wasn't too much of a receiver. I was always giving. Give. You hear me? That go with my energy too. You hear me? I be giving all I have, bro. You hear me? Till I be drained. You get what I'm saying? And I don't know why I be doing that shit. You hear me? So that's me having to do shadow work. You hear me? Man, I'm telling you, son, I'm no longer no fucking ordinary person, bro. You hear me? I'm no longer no ordinary person, son. You hear me? And I see shit completely different. You hear me? So if you want to know anything about me, you hear me? You ask me. You get what I'm saying? Oh man, why you do this? You hear me? And I'm gonna tell you why. You hear me? Because one thing, you hear me? I always been honest. You hear me? At a certain part of my life, you hear me? At a young age, nigga, I stopped lying. You hear me? I stopped lying. Long ass time ago, son. I don't have no reason to lie on myself. I don't have no reason to lie on nobody else. You hear me? I never step on another nigga toes. You hear me? I understand my boundaries. I understand other people have boundaries too. So by me respecting my boundaries, I make sure I don't go too far to make sure I fuck over somebody else. You hear me? I never been the type of nigga who thought about myself. You hear me? I always thought about other people first. You hear me? And that's why I fuck up at. You hear me? That's my downfall, because I look out for so many fucking people. You hear me? And I don't get that same shit. You get what I'm saying? That's my downfall. You hear me? Being a stepping stone for other people. You hear me? And the fact that, you know, I end up changing my life and shit. Niggas don't like that shit. Niggas don't like the fact, you hear me, that I don't want kiss nobody ass. You hear me? I can't do it, son. You hear me? And at the end of the day, me personally, if I don't like somebody, you hear me, I still respect you. At the end of the day, you hear me? I don't have to come in your face, you hear me, and act like I won't be your friend or friendly Bob with you, hear me? I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do it. You hear me? At the end of the day, you hear me? Oh, what's that? Woo woo woo. You hear me? Now I'm gonna just keep it like that. You hear me? At the end of the day, you hear me? Still, at the end of the day, because people work different. You hear me? And then you have to look at the spectrum. You have to look at the spectrum of good and bad. You have to look at it like that. You hear me? But it can't always end up that way. You get what I'm saying? You have to be neutral. You get what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, you hear me? Instead of me not fucking with somebody, you get what I'm saying? It still was them. You hear me? I respect you for who you is. You hear me? I respect you. You hear me? You living just like I am. You hear me? I respect you. You breathing. You hear me? You looking. You hear me? You living. Huh? You hear me? It's the same shit. You hear me? It's just a whole different perspective of where I'm at. You hear me? Like I was just explaining the other day. If you look at a fucking ball, if you think about a ball, you hear me? And you got points all around this ball. Just look at it. Just think about a basketball. You get what I'm saying? And every part of the ball have a different color on it, right? This is fucking different people. Each fucking spot, you hear me, is a whole different perspective from yours. You hear me? So when you elevate and then you going up, you hear me, the more information you going to, y'all end up coming to the same fucking point. Because obviously y'all understand the same shit. Y'all is the same shit. Duh, nigga. Come on, man. You hear me? Like I said, son, I'm an observer. You hear me? I observe everything. You hear me? And I listen to everything. You get what I'm saying? I may not be paying attention or whatever, you hear me, but I'm listening. And since I'm listening, I can see it. You hear me? I don't. And you hear me? It be like, for me, you hear me? It be like, y'all know the little quick look? The quick look, you hear me, when y'all driving? You hear me? You do the quick look to side so you can get over? You hear me? That's how quick it be. You hear me, nigga? That it be like how it be just as fast as a fucking scene changing in a fucking TV show. That's how quick it be. You hear me? You hear me? And I already know what it is. You get what I'm saying? I keep my ears open. You hear me? I don't have to see it to understand it. You hear me? I listen. You hear me? And if I already know the situation or what's already going on and I see it, then I completely understand what it is. You hear me? I'm an empath. I'm a real empath. You hear me? That's why I don't really like being around people. My energy get drained. You hear me? I be walking that motherfucker like niggas don't even understand, boy. I be walking. You hear me? Let's say I go walk to the fucking stove. You hear me? I go walk to the stove to go get some chips or some shit, right? I could be happy as a motherfucker. You hear me? I could be happy, bruh. Going to the store, you hear me, and I walk in this motherfucker, and they got somebody in that bitch feeling bad. You hear me? They may not even show it on their face, but I can feel it. You get what I'm saying? I can feel it. You hear me? Niggas don't understand, son. But at the end of the day, you hear me? That's who I am. You hear me? And even though I just explained who I was to you, you get what I'm saying? Understand within all the shit that I said, it's a whole lot of shit that's missing out. You get what I'm saying? I mean, you could go by what you heard. You hear me? At the end of the day, but it's still more shit. You hear me? Or you don't have to listen to it. You hear me? At the end of the day, it's up to you. You hear me? Just like I said in my old video, you hear me, man? Takes what's useful and leave what's not. You hear me? If you want to understand me, you hear me? If you want to know me, you hear me? You got to ask me about me. You hear me? You could go by what you see, but I guarantee you got it wrong. Even though I'm telling you all this information, son, y'all really don't know how the fuck my brain works. This is real shit. Don't understand how my brain works, son. I don't see shit the way you see it. You heard me? And this is why you have to break shit down to people so they can see where you coming from. And then they have their own personal understanding and they put it in what they already got going, and bam, now they pieces is connected. Man, stop playing, son. I got a whole lot of shit, you hear me, that I could be telling niggas, son. You hear me? Real shit. A whole lot of shit, bro. You just don't understand. You hear me? Yeah, man, it's life. You hear me? Life. All that shit is, man. It's all a trip. You hear me? It's all a trip, bro. I love y'all, you hear me? That's real shit. That's real shit. I just don't understand some people. You get what I'm saying? It's not everybody, you hear me? It's just some people. You hear me? I'm not me. And hold on, let me. You get what I'm saying? When I explain shit too, you hear me? Understand that I'm speaking in general. You get what I'm saying? I'm just speaking in general. But if you feel any type of way as if I'm talking to you personally, you hear me, or you feel like it's the message is good to you or whatever, understand, you hear me? If it's a negative, you get what I'm saying? Understand that's a problem you have to deal with. You hear me? That's not my problem. You hear me? That's a problem you have to deal with. You hear me? But if it's something positive, you get what I'm saying? Just take it. You get what I'm saying? And you break it down to your own fucking understanding. Understand that I'm only speaking in general. You hear me? So if you feel like it's personal, that's a problem that you have to deal with. You hear me? Go do some shadow work. Go do some shadow work, man. Alright, for real, son. I still do shadow work, son. I do shadow work every day. You hear me? It's a problem. As long as I ever talk on a fucking camera, here I'm gonna for sure drop this. You hear me? And that's another thing too. Even when I drop videos, you hear me? Understand that this video may have been made 3 days ago, a whole week ago, a whole month ago. You hear me? I really be holding on to shit. You hear me? I said that shit before, bro. I'm a late bloomer. You hear me? I really hold on to shit. You hear me? I drop it when I feel like it have to be dropped. You hear me? I move on divine timing. You hear me? I don't move when another nigga tell me to move. I move on my own, you hear me, whenever I feel like I'm being told to. You hear me? If it don't feel right, you hear me, I'm not fucking with it. You hear me? Yeah, man. This is who I am. I'm not gonna be your ordinary YouTuber. You hear me? I'm gonna be talking to you as if I'm talking to you right in front of my fucking face. You hear me? Yeah, man. It's me. I love y'all though, for sure. You hear me? Let me show y'all one more thing. You hear me? Look how beautiful y'all is. You hear me? How beautiful y'all is. I mean, not this, you hear me? This shit, the housing and shit fucked up, you hear me? Because it shouldn't be here. You hear me? Y'all don't even know how beautiful y'all is, man. It's immaculate. You hear me? Life is a gift, you hear me? Make sure it's precious, you hear me? It's a real precious gift for us, but to even breathe, you hear me? To see all this shit. You hear me? To even experience what it is to live. You hear me? Being a human, you hear me? Crazy, son. Crazy. Yeah, man. That's life, bro. You hear me? That's life. Everybody go through shit, you hear me? Everybody have their own problems, you hear me? Most people would say everybody not perfect. Yeah, I say that, you hear me, it's a 50-50 for me. You hear me? I say we perfect, you hear me? But everything was mathematically designed. You hear me? You was made to be exactly who you was. You hear me? Even with the bad. Even with the bad, you hear me? It made you exactly who you was, son. You hear me? You is perfect. You hear me? They don't want you to be. You hear me? The only thing that make you imperfect, you hear me, is so-called flaws. You hear me? Problems that you have. You hear me? Shit that you have to face. You hear me? Things, but once you work on yourself, you hear me, nigga, you gonna be perfectly perfect. Oh man, I cracked myself up, bro. That's my favorite thing to do in life, bro. Laugh, son. That's my favorite thing to do in life, bro. Yeah, that's another thing I want to say too, you hear me? About Leos being egotistical, you hear me? You know, egotistical ways or whatever like that. But, you gotta understand that, Leos, is a representation of the sun, you hear me? You get what I'm saying? So, with all that information, you hear me, that a nigga be receiving, and you gotta also understand that the sun changed every month, you hear me? It's in a different sign every month. So your Leo sign also being filtered through other signs. You get what I'm saying? So, at the end of the day, me talking about me, you hear me, is me giving y'all my testimony of throughout my life and the shit I've been through, shit I see, at least from my personal understanding, you hear me, and shit like that. So this just me from my point of view, you hear me? I'm just giving you my information from my point of view. You get what I'm saying? It's the same thing, vice versa. You hear me? So, me being egotistical, you hear me? Like, I know you heard the saying, never throw rocks at the sun, or don't throw rocks at the sun. You hear me? So why would I fight my egotistical ways, you hear me, when I could just give y'all my testimony? You hear me? Give y'all who I am, you hear me? My personal understanding, you hear me? The shit that I see, the shit I've been through, and shit like that. You get what I'm saying? So I'ma just take that negative, you hear me, and I'ma turn it to something positive. You hear me? And leave me, you hear me, some shit that I've been through, you hear me, I'm pretty sure they have other people in the world that been through the same thing. You hear me? So me giving my testimony and breaking shit down on how I handled it, and by them being a different sign, you hear me, it's gonna be completely different for them. You get what I'm saying? Oh man, I see you do it like this, but bam, I would have did it like this. So woo. You get what I'm saying? It's about building and destroying. You hear me? We destroying all the shit that we don't need, all the negativity. You hear me? Nigga don't need none of it. You hear me? You can throw that shit out the window. You can throw that shit in a box. You hear me? Where it belongs. You hear me? And that's what it is. I ain't trying to be nobody, you hear me? I never claimed myself to be a thug. You hear me? I never claimed myself to be a gangster. You hear me? I never claimed myself to be a killer. I never claimed myself to be any of that but a fucking real nigga. You hear me? And I stuck to that my whole life. You hear me? Never switched on nobody, you hear me? Never ratted on no nigga. You hear me? I never did none of that. You hear me? I always been myself. You hear me? I always been 100 with myself, and I always been 100 with people. You hear me? I don't have to lie on people, you hear me? I don't have to do none of that shit. You hear me? I'm just being myself. You hear me? And if you know Leo traits, nigga, Leos are loyal. You hear me? Until you step on their toes. You hear me? And then you gonna see a whole different person. You hear me? Cause at the end of the day, Leos fuck with. I can't speak for everybody, but I know I can speak for myself for sure. You hear me? But just by me going off the traits, you get what I'm saying? Nigga not gonna fuck over nobody, you hear me? Once a nigga fuck over me, you hear me, you gonna see a whole nother different me, you hear me? I ain't gonna be like, I'm gonna be like acting, you hear me? None of that, you hear me? I'm not gonna be around you no more, you hear me? I ain't even gonna be able to talk to you like I used to, you hear me? Cause that's just who I am, you hear me? Once I figure out that's how you move, you hear me? Then I'm gonna move different, you hear me? I don't have no time for it. You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, you hear me? At the end of the day, you hear me, nigga, I'm the only nigga who exists. Just like you. You hear me? So I don't need nobody else but myself. You hear me? Everybody else is just a reflection of who I am. So at the end of the day, everything is mental. So all the problems I deal with, everything I go through, you hear me, it starts from the mind. You hear me? For anything that exists, it even started from the mind. You hear me? So at the end of the day, all my problems and shit I deal with mentally. You hear me? That's why they can't. You hear me? Even with all this shit, you hear me? All this shit I'm carrying, baggage, you hear me? Working through present moment shit, past shit, futuristic type shit, you hear me? Yeah. All this shit I'm dealing with, you hear me? Fucking warrior. Oh man, it's real shit, bro. All this shit a nigga be dealing with, you hear me? I still stand strong, bro. What's down with it, my brother? Huh? Yeah, man, I'm out here making a video. Damn, nigga, you straight? Oh, man.
Hey, give me that bag of weed till tomorrow. I owe you.
Oh, yeah, I ain't worried about it.
No, for real. Dead serious. Give me that bag of weed. I'll give you tomorrow.
I say, I ain't worried about your phone.
No, dead serious. All the time. No, give me a nickel bag. A blunt. I'll give you your fucking money. Extra wood, I'll give you your money back. I ain't worried about this. Hell, now you gotta worry about it. You need your fucking money, nigga. No, brother, give me a bag of weed. I'm dead serious. And I don't ask you for nothing until I need it, right? And you know I'll give you your shit back. Everybody on the block will take care of everybody.
Nah, I ain't worried about this shit. Like I said, yeah,
Thank you, bro. I appreciate it, bro. That's enough for a blunt. Yeah, that's enough right for a blunt. Appreciate it, bro.
ain't good.
You want me to give you a bottle out?
I'm not straight.
Man, watch it. No, he gonna say no, he don't want it.
Yeah, I know, that's what I'm saying.
He don't want
I'm blessing it for sure, you hear me? That's for you. Gucci. Nah, I do that to everybody. I do that to everybody. You see, look, I'm making a video right now, I'm just telling them nigga, you hear me? Making a video right now. You hear me? As I just gave it to you, you hear me? They say, man, you must think I'm a good nigga. What I just said, you hear me? I do that shit for everybody.
Nigga, you fine, I ain't give everybody.
Man, come on, man. You hear me? I just.
Want some money, here you go right here.
Nah, you Gucci.
Alright, you want some money right here.
Gucci.
I ain't got no change, I could've gave you this.
Nah, it's straight. You hear me? Alright, shit, man. I just bless you. You hear me? For sure. I ain't worried about that shit. Not literally just saying that shit.
So you don't do nothing?
Huh?
You don't drink or do nothing?
Every once in a while.
Alright, well, we'll
not no hard. I can't drink that shit.
You see me?
I know you Gucci, you hear me? I love you.
Buy me a drink, bitch. I can't say no. I can't say no. I gotta give it to you.
Nah, that's all love, you hear me? For sure. You hear me? Like I just said.
I made sure. I said, you want some? I said, you know I go to work tomorrow, my boy.
Nah, you good for sure. You hear me? That's for you. You hear me? You good. Alright, like. Yeah, I'll make sure you're straight for sure. Yeah, nah, I'm just here making it. You hear me? But you see how spirit works. You hear me? See how spirit works. Look, man just came outside, you hear me? Look, spirit came outside just to show you hear me, what I mean. Stop playing, you hear me? That's synchronized. You hear me? Stop playing, man. You gotta see synchronicity, man. Stop fucking playing. You hear me? I know exactly what's going on. You hear me? I see what's going on. You hear me? I can feel it. I can feel it. You hear me? Yeah, man, that's what it is. You hear me? That's who I am. I've always been a giving ass person. You hear me? It be plenty like niggas don't even know, nigga. I be on my way to work. You hear me? Motherfuckers like, oh yeah, ooh. Nigga, I just gave a nigga damn near a whole gram and a half early after I got off. You heard me? Nigga asked me if I had pine. You heard me? I told him, yeah, the niggas walked up talking about, yeah, his sister got killed. You hear me? From Mississippi. Woo, 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 woo. You hear me? I just bless this nigga with some fucking pine. I don't bless him. You hear me? Ain't asking no shit, man. That nigga say, man, I got a cash app you. Woo, woo, woo. I'm like, nah, man, you good. I bless niggas all the time. Niggas don't even know. You hear me? I bless niggas all the time, you hear me? Niggas don't even know. You hear me? And I never act like somebody I'm not. That's one thing about me, you hear me? I never act like somebody I'm not. You hear me? Yeah, man. I love y'all, you hear me? I just wanted to talk some shit, you hear me? This is about me, you hear me? But at the end of the day, you hear me? I can still drop some more videos about me, you hear me? Y'all just gotta ask for some shit, you hear me? Like, you know, what part of my life, or boo 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 boo, you hear me? Y'all do that, you hear me? Like, comment, subscribe, you hear me? For sure. You hear me? And I'm thinking about doing, I thought about this shit earlier, you hear me? Some shit called, situation series, you hear me? Well, well, I could do the first situation, you hear me? With basically me breaking shit down and explaining shit, or how you could do this, or woo 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 woo, you hear me? How, at least from my perspective on what I would do, you hear me? And you know, y'all could do however y'all want to do it. You get what I'm saying? But I'm thinking about doing some shit called a situation series, you hear me? Or you put in a situation, you hear me? And then I make a video on, you know, what I would do. You get what I'm saying? How I see it, whatever like that. You get what I'm saying? You hear me? And I do that shit so that way, you hear me? I could communicate with everybody else too. You get what I'm saying? You hear me? And fuck with everybody on some shit. You hear me? Because at the end of the day, you hear me? It's about building and destroying. So we getting rid of all the old shit that a nigga thought a nigga was supposed to be using, hear me? All the shit that's not beneficial to a nigga, you hear me? We gonna get rid of all that shit, you hear me? Then I'ma start with, well, I should do that not theory shit, you hear me? But yeah, man, that shit'll be a little complicated with all this shit going on in the world, you hear me? But yeah, man, I could do the first situation, you hear me? Like saying, bam, if this was boom boom boom, you hear me? What would you do? Da 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 da. You get what I'm saying? You hear me? I do the first one, you hear me? So excuse me. After that, you hear me? Y'all could just put in y'all own situations, probably some. Let's just say y'all could even put situations that y'all been through. You hear me? Y'all don't necessarily have to see that's what y'all been through. That's what y'all did. You get what I'm saying? But you could just put in a situation. All right, what would you do if da 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 da? You hear me? And I'ma just give you my yeah. You get what I'm saying? So yeah, I'm thinking about doing that shit too. You hear me? I might just. You know what I'm saying? You hear me? Because that'd be a nice way to converse with everybody. You hear me? Or, you know. But yeah, think about that shit too. You hear me? So, like I said, you hear me? I love y'all. You hear me? I'm out this bitch. You hear me? Like, comment, subscribe. You hear me? I fuck with y'all. You hear me? I fuck with everybody. You hear me? Yeah, man, let's get it. You hear me? It's all about building, man. Let's get it.